So we got mostly DIY looks for our Storytime 63 today. But we did have a few central themes. One of the other ones of which was creative chaos. So I've gone for a mixture of DIY disasters and creative chaos in my outfit today. That's great. Very good, Dad. But you can't really see, I don't think you're really close, but I've got paint all over, actually. It's just very bright in my front room, so you can't see my paint. Maybe when we put up the curtains later, next time, I won't be quite so bright. Other topics that we had, the other one was caused by my animals. I was intrigued to see whether there'd be any examples of major changes to your house or garden or whatever caused due to animals.
We can put pictures up.
Put some pictures up. Yeah. We might do a little bit of a slideshow over this introductory bit of things caused by my animals. If anyone's got some at home, they want to send a photo in.
There's a whole lot of other stuff. And there's a whole lot of other stuff that's not necessarily caused by my animals, but I did them because I have my animals.
Yes.
Yeah. Like how you get a bean bag for your friends and then your cat takes it over, so you get another bean bag and the other cat takes it over. So you have multiple bean bags and then they want to go outside but they're not allowed to, so you put a cat flap to the balcony and you add a cat cage on the outside and you just like keep adding all little things for them.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly
your house is a cat house.
Yeah. Oh, here's an example of something that I have because of my animals. This is my laptop power pack, but it looks like a giant cable for some sort of suction or something, because it's got this plastic conduit, which, by the way, actually protects it for about 1 minute maximum. If they do decide to, they can just bite straight through it, but it's very loud, so at least it alerts us to the problem and we can quickly come running and remove the power cable from reach. That's the only one you can see in my picture, but our rabbits have basically a palace of relatively expensive wooden hidey houses with 2 stories and tunnels that go into them and things, and they have this whole corner that's their space. Do they go in there? No, they go in the blanket fort that Lloyd creates with our blankets over some of our chairs or coffee table, which is in the middle of the carpet in our sort of central area of the room. So they take over everything.
And your garden, sorry, Sarah, your garden's being redesigned because you have to remove all the plants.
Yes, that's true. I've spent a lot of weekends pulling buttercup out of the lawn because that's poisonous, and removing otherwise would be very nice bulbs like daffodils and bluebells and things, because they're all toxic things, and replacing them with nice edible herbs and rose bushes. Luckily, they can eat those. And all kinds of berries and brambles and things. So yes, the garden is still a work in progress. There's still a lot of stuff out there that has to come out. But anyway, so we had a general theme of animal mayhem, under which came that sort of major changes made to your home or garden to accommodate your animal or their behavior. Also, training mishaps, pets destroying your stuff. We've all had a bit of that. And then, kind of related, weird reasons for delivery or non-delivery of parcels, especially animal-related ones, like, the pet cat said no. So some of those. When complex rules or systems cause you to overlook the simple or obvious. So Emily told us a lovely story last month about a gate that had a code and all sorts of technical things which they were diligently doing, and they couldn't open the gate. And the reason was that the gate wasn't in fact locked in the first place. They could have just gone straight through. Intermittent tech success, when the technology works at random. Creativity without an audience, and I added creative chaos to that.
Yes.
I think sometimes when we're creating without an audience, we get carried away. I know I do, and sort of keep branching off, bouncing off ideas and thinking of other things to do and not finishing any of them and having lots of things in progress and so forth. Just get a professional, or DIY gone wrong, which is, of course, why we've all got paint and drills and things.
Oh, I haven't got one of them.
Jenny's pointing to Andrew. Just get a professional, Andrew. Is that?
I didn't know.
Yeah.
It's me. It's me.
James, my professional.
Yes, please. Yeah. I agree. We have a few things where we've actually decided we will just get a professional. One of which is just get rid of all this cardboard, because otherwise it could take years, literally years. We have a whole room of cardboard right now. Special occasion recipe disasters. And in honor of Australian Mother's Day tomorrow, I added in unconventional mother figures, because we've got a few characters in Storytime who kind of play the role of the mother in someone's life without actually being their mum. So our poem today is a little bit of a cryptic one, because it started out as one of the House and Words prompts and some other prompts that I'd included, and was going to be a character poem. And then I adapted it, because I hadn't finished it, to fit the topic about intermittent technological functioning, and sort of just getting an expert to help you kind of thing. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, this poem, and it's called Wiring. It's self-explanatory. Everyone is wrong. I'm practicing emotions in the mirror before morning tea because I know that a changed opinion comes at a cost. And my tech might have an intermittent fault or an intermittent success, or I might have to huffily own up to being no expert, because maybe the intermittent fault is me and the answers are best left to the professionals. And if all of us in the room are wrong, it's probably best we stop messing with the wiring. DIY isn't always the answer. Sometimes the answer is 42. There is none.
I love it.
I haven't given today's story a name. I just went to go, and today's story is called, and realized that I haven't done title. We'll name it at the end together, I think.
Right.
That might be fun. So for a story about animal mayhem and DIY struggles and so forth, this is our Storytime 63. Andi peered crossly at the complicated mechanism that held the gate in front of the small countryside cottage closed. On the front was a sign with the instruction, "Please shut the gate," in accusing red lettering. However, Andi could not for the life of her see how to open the gate in the first place. There were wire loops, hooks, a handle that seemed impossible to actually lift or turn, and some kind of turny cog thing, none of which connected in a sensible order or looked as though they would do anything to either open or close the slatted wooden panel. It reached as high as Andi's chest and had large, rusty iron hinges. Admittedly, Andi wasn't very tall, so quite a lot of things reached her chest height. But this one was particularly problematic, since she was supposed to be delivering a large, heavy parcel marked fragile to the front door that lay some meters beyond it. Andi walked away from the gate and along the side fence, searching for a lower section where she might be able to lift the parcel over. This was not to be, however. The fence continued at chest height, all the way around, standing some meters from the front veranda at its closest point. Andi looked at the fragile sticker on the parcel and sighed. It was definitely out of the question to toss it in. She made her way back to the front of the property and put the parcel back on her special trolley to pull out her pad of non-delivery slips. She filled in the reference number, date and time, and signed her name with her signature heart over the I, then stood gazing at the reason for non-delivery section. Eventually, Andi ticked other and wrote at the bottom, gate latch unfathomable. Then she slipped the note into the letterbox on the gatepost, took hold of her trolley handle, and hurried back to her van. No one would believe her if she told them the kinds of things that put her behind schedule. Not too far away, in the same neighbourhood, Kasey stood with her hands on her hips, looking at a deep, trench-like hole that ran from her bed of sunflowers, some of which were now looking rather less sunny due to being uprooted, under the back fence of her property, and into the field beyond. The cause of these extensive excavations was evident from the notable absence of Spanner from the yard. Spanner was a golden retriever. He was very lovable, but also very resistant to training, as evidenced by his failure to become a guide dog. Kasey had taken him on somewhat accidentally when his siblings, Sunny, Seb, and Sandy, all passed their tests and moved on with their training without him. Now Spanner lived with Kasey, warring with her cat, Lolly, destroying the flowers she attempted to grow for her floristry apprenticeship, and interrupting her Instagram exercise videos with gifts of slobbery socks, excited yaps, and on the most embarrassing occasions, humping. Nonetheless, Kasey had grown to love Spanner and was doing her best to continue with some of his training in her spare time. She was very anxious to discover him missing for the third time that month, although she knew there was little point to this worry. He would be brought home by a disapproving neighbour within an hour, probably having been dragged out of someone's dam where he'd spotted some ducks. Hopefully he'd avoided any altercations with ibises this time. Spanner had an unhealthy obsession with the unfriendly so-called bin chickens in the neighbourhood. Well, there was nothing for it. She would have to dig up the sunflower bed and move it so that some mesh could be run under the soil along the fence. Hopefully, what was generally described as rabbit-proof fencing would also prove difficult for other animal excavators to breach. Kasey headed for her garage, where she kept her gardening tools. The head of Kasey's neighbour, Joan, appeared over the side fence. "Kasey, dear, the postie's at your door, and I've made you some scones." Joan proffered a wicker basket over the fence, filled with more scones than Kasey could possibly eat in a lifetime. Kasey didn't really want scones, but she did want the non-judgmental company of Joan, who had become something of a mother figure to her as she settled into the new experience of country living over the past few years. "Oh, I think that'll be the new home gym equipment," she replied, taking the scone basket and hurrying around the side of the house. "Thank you, Joan. Come and have a cuppa once I get the parcel." Kasey had no intention of attempting to eat these scones by herself, and the vet said Spanner wasn't supposed to be given too many baked goods. Joan walked along her side of the fence, keeping pace with Kasey. "Is Spanner out again?" Kasey pulled a face, rolling her eyes. "Yes." "Perhaps you should pay a professional to do something about the fence for you. It's a lot of work," Joan remarked. Kasey bristled. "I can do it." She turned her attention to the young delivery person, standing on the front veranda. "Hello, is that for Kasey Andrews?" The post person gestured to a very long cardboard box which they'd leaned up against Kasey's wall. "Yes, from Workout Studio." "Thank you." Kasey started trying to heft the package towards the door, sticking her foot inside the fly screen to hold it open. The delivery person hovered. "Last time I was here, I said hello to a very nice dog," they commented. "I was hoping to see them again." Kasey paused, and Joan bustled around from her front gate to Kasey's, holding an armful of produce from her garden that Kasey could tell she intended to put in Kasey's fridge. The dog isn't here today, Joan told the postie matter-of-factly. He's escaped and gone on an adventure. The postie looked disappointed. Oh. Then they pointed enthusiastically down the road to where Alana from the gym could be seen crossly tugging a grinning, wet spanner along by the collar. There he is! Fantastic, murmured Kasey. A little way closer to town, Florrie and her tante, Ada, were squished into Florrie's Ford Festiva, which was piled high with a full load of Florrie's things and some of Pan's things. Pan was Florrie's housemate and, it seemed, was determined to remain her housemate, despite the fact that Florrie was moving. Also squeezed into the back seat with Pan was Wurst, a ferret, who was the descendant of various previous ferrets named Sausage. The name Wurst had come about when Florrie, as a child, had frequently called Sausage of that era the Wurst, and Ada had thought that Florrie was correctly saying the ferret's name in German. Florrie, upon understanding this, had not wanted to correct her tante, who was very proud of any small bits of German Florrie picked up. Plus, Ada had, since that time, called the ferrets Wurst by default. Wurst was supposed to be in his travel box, but he'd escaped just minutes into the journey and was at present trying to burrow down a protesting Pan's shirt. Florrie was ignoring this, which she could see taking place in her rear-view mirror, because she rather felt that Pan and Wurst deserved each other. Wurst she'd inherited. Rather than ever particularly desiring a ferret, she'd just always had one. Pan she'd acquired as a roommate during an internship at the BBC in the UK, and had somehow since been unable to avoid, despite returning to the other side of the world, having various partners come and go, having a ferret who made wherever Florrie lived a chaotic place to be, and now moving to the countryside. Pandora lived according to omens, and she claimed that running into Florrie on multiple occasions and in widely varied locations meant that there was fate involved. Well, her fate now was to deal with Wurst. Andi, meanwhile, was trying to update the tracking information for a large padded bag parcel she'd just left in somebody's safe place. The safe place in question was an old, rusty, overturned sink that had been removed, probably during a laundry renovation, and placed outside the front door amongst some pot plants. Andi eyed it dubiously, then squinted at the screen of her app, which was hard to see in the bright sunshine. It was the sort of day when being out on deliveries was an enjoyable chance to take in the fresh air, as long as the technology behaved itself and the properties to which she was meant to deliver were accessible. So far, there was already one mark against today in the form of the impenetrable gate from earlier, but also one in favour in the form of a very friendly, if rather soggy, golden retriever. Andi was hoping the tech would refrain from adding to today's negatives, but she wasn't hopeful. After making the appropriate blip upon her scanning the parcel, the scanner had been showing processing and a little progress bar on the screen for the next 5 minutes. Andi was unsure whether this meant A, the scanner app was frozen and she should restart it, B, the information had not been processed and would be lost if she closed the app, or C, the delivery notification had already gone through and she just had a frozen phone screen. As she watched, the scanner app blinked, turned the screen blue, and then closed itself. Well, have you done it or not? Andi asked the device. She tried reopening the scanner, and a loading wheel came up on the screen. Lucky I don't need maps to find the next address, she told it with a sigh. She'd probably get in trouble later for not uploading a photo of the parcel in its safe place, but the app clearly wasn't going to let her do that, so Andi guessed she'd have to deal with it. Maybe there would be a delighted recipient of a surprise care package or a friendly cat at the next house to make up for it. Kasey at this juncture was sharing scones and tea with Joan from next door and trying to order some suitable underground mesh for her spanner-proof fence, while Spanner pulled apart a beanbag which Kasey had given up on saving. I don't know, Kasey, Joan sighed. Do you really have time to dig up all that soil by hand and lay the wire underneath? I could hire a professional for you. Look, this chap could do it. She jabbed a finger at an advert in a piece of local junk mail that Kasey had neglected to throw in the recycling bin. I can do digging, Kasey insisted. Seems a bit silly to do all the weights I do if I can't even shift a bit of soil, doesn't it? She clicked on something and started entering payment details. Joan shrugged and took a bite of her scone. Right, Kasey announced, dusting flour from the scones off her hands and closing her laptop. I should really try to put together those shelves for the weights. It will be a lot nicer in the home gym with all that up off the floor. Spanner looked up at her from the corner, wild-eyed, with foam beanbag beans stuck all over his nose. It will also look more professional in my personal training videos, Kasey mused. As long as you stay out of them, Spanner. Spanner whined in reply, a beanbag bean wafting around his lips. 20 minutes later, Kasey was sitting on the floor of her improvised garage gym, looking at something roughly ladder-shaped and a set of 30 further instructions for assembly. Why is this so complicated? She asked her cat, Lolly, who was perched on the weights bench, a disapproving expression on her twitching whiskers. It's just a shelf for heavy objects. Kasey flopped down on her back for a moment, thinking it was about time for a rest. Her eyes fell on a floral arrangement she'd left on a table in the corner. Oh, damn it, I forgot to take that inside. She got up and went to inspect the flowers. Most of them had dried quite effectively in the hot air of the garage and held their shape in the vase. Deep purple-grey lavender buds and crisp cornflowers blending in a chalky pastel array of indigo. Only the white daisies and greenery gave away the fact that this had not been intended as a dried arrangement, the petals of the daisies dropping to coat the wood of the old wooden table, and the ferns she'd added losing leaves from their tough, thick stems. Kasey quickly pushed the pieces of the weights rack to one side near the door and grabbed her pruning shears. Carefully, she untied the string holding the dried stems in place and spread the flowers out across the table, snipping away dead-looking pieces and sweeping the dropped petals to the floor with the palm of one hand. What seemed to Kasey like only a few moments later? She was trying to choose between white and blue ribbon, stems of eucalyptus and dried grasses arrayed across the table and floor, when Spanner ran into the garage with a shoe in his mouth. Lolly puffed herself up to 3 times her normal size, as though she'd never seen the dog before, and hissed loudly. Then Joan came hobbling after Spanner, wearing the pear for the shoe, and calling Spanner a waddling wallop of a dog as she came. Your phone was going off in the kitchen, she told Kasey after a breath, waving the device in her direction. Oh. Kasey looked up in surprise, not having realised that she didn't have her phone with her. Not the kind of thing an Instagram influencer was supposed to do, she reflected. Tell him to bring it here, she instructed Joan, referring to Spanner and the shoe. Joan fixed Spanner with a stern gaze. Spanner, bring it here. Spanner waddled across the garage floor, back end waving, in a direction that wasn't quite the right course to take the shoe to Joan. A mischievous spark danced about in his big brown doggy eyes. Spanner, Kasey told him firmly. She walked over to Joan, taking her phone back as she reached her. Bring it here. Spanner started in their direction, his tongue lolling around the shoe in a grin, then stopped, did a play bow, and took off at speed out of the garage, knocking the table so that all the carefully arranged colours for Kasey's floristry scattered across the floor, and eliciting another hiss from Lolly. He does bring it here when you're not looking, Kasey told Joan, bowing her head in embarrassment. You can borrow my wellies. She glanced at her phone and saw Florrie's name on the screen. Oh no. She grabbed as much of her creative flower mess as she could, dumping it back into a box on the table. I forgot Florrie was moving today. Florrie and Ada, at this point in time, were at Florrie's new house, trying to reassemble her bed so that she would have somewhere to sleep. Florrie no longer had the instructions for this task. Pan had declared this wouldn't matter, as she would be able to work it out. However, she was currently distracted, having found some pre-existing picture hooks, and thus needing to spread all of the pieces of art they owned between them out on the living room floor in order to select what would go where, practical concerns such as beds far from her thoughts. Pan might have been able to visualize how the pieces of Florrie's bed were supposed to fit, mentally rotating them to slot together in her mind before attempting it with her hands. Florrie, who had aphantasia, could not do this. Ada, who suffered on and off from Alice in Wonderland syndrome and was currently experiencing some disturbances to her sense of time and space, was not much help either. Florrie was fuming, not only at Pan, whose distraction and gradual unfazed approach was predictable, but at her oldest friend, Kasey, who lived in this town and was supposed to have been excited to help her. Not to mention Wurst, who had got straight on top of the empty kitchen cupboards and was zooming about, pouncing on things, and generally proving that the new house was absolutely not Wurst-proof. So far, he'd made a hole in some pre-existing lace curtains, peeled the veneer off a chipboard cupboard door and left chewed little pieces of the wood beneath all over the floor, and climbed into Ada's handbag, causing a panic while they all thought he was missing for 15 minutes. Florrie and Ada had just managed to identify the bed head and foot and the main supports when there was a knock at the door. Since her hands were full, Florrie called out to Pan, "Can you get the door?" Pan was heard shuffling off. There was a rattling noise. "I can't work out how to unlock this door," Pan called back down the hallway. "I have a delivery for Florrie," a voice shouted from outside. "Just a moment." Florrie put down her bit of the bed frame and clambered over the other slats and screws. She picked her way between all the artwork on the living room floor and joined Pan at the front door. "Sorry," she shouted out at the delivery person. "We're new to this house." She and Pan both peered at the lock. "Does it pull out and then twist?" Florrie suggested, tugging at the mechanism. "Maybe the key has to be in?" Pan pondered. They rattled the door around this way and that, making a racket, while the person trying to deliver the package waited patiently outside. "Would you like me to bring it to the back door?" they asked, as Ada emerged slowly from Florrie's room and made her way to the door too. Ada reached in between the two younger women to grasp the handle rather than the lock, pulled, and the door opened. "It is not locked," she pointed out, stating the obvious as Florrie and Pan looked out at the postie. "How many people does it take to open a door, huh?" remarked the delivery person cheerfully, proffering an open-topped box. In a style Florrie imagined was only possible in the country, the box had its top flaps cut off and had been addressed with a sticky note taped to the side. In it were 3 different species of sunflower, 2 basil plants, a small lavender bush, and assorted succulents, along with a Tupperware box of scones and an envelope. Florrie grinned and instantly forgave Kasey, who could be the only possible sender of such a gift. "Thank you so much for waiting," she told the postie, taking the box with glee. Wurst chose this moment to slither between Ada's feet and scoot out of the door, running up the postie's leg and causing them to let out a shout of surprise. Sorry, Wurst, come here." Florrie hurriedly shoved the box of plants into Ada's hands and grabbed the ferret from where he was clinging to the delivery person's waist and attempting to get into the satchel hung over their shoulder. "So sorry about that," Florrie repeated as she hauled Wurst away. "Perhaps the entrance hall should be out of bounds for the worst," Ada remarked, carrying the box inside. The introduction of the new succulents was a great distraction for Florrie, who promptly felt the need to begin designing a plant feature wall, marking out spaces to put small shelves and digging through all of her bags and boxes in search of paints to create a mural scene of a garden. Ada gave up on assembling Florrie's bed on her own and instead set about unpacking the kitchen and applying special Wurst-proof locks to all the cupboard doors. Everyone in the house slept on mattresses or yoga mats on the floor that night, but at least Florrie had a very peaceful few hours designing and painting her plant wall, ordering shelves, and then immediately starting to plan how this could be a backdrop for photos if she held a housewarming. Andi found herself quite regularly making deliveries to the properties that in her head were labelled Golden Retriever House and Stuck Door House over the next few weeks. After the confusion over the door, Stuck Door House began to settle into a relatively organised state. It was a state of constantly acquiring more plants, colours and furniture, but seeming to have a purpose, generally designated by the addressee Florrie or the older German accented woman, and a place, often taken over by the other young woman with the skull-shaped earrings, for them all. Golden Retriever House, on the other hand, gave Andi a bad case of wanting to intervene. Kasey, who all the parcels were addressed to, seemed determined to solve a number of problems on her own, but lacked the discipline to research the means of solving them properly, or lost motivation when she discovered that the solution was complex. For example, early in the week, Andi had delivered an enormous lumpy roll in brown paper, presumably of chicken wire, which was presumably meant to be used to make the back fence dog-proof. When she approached the house with this parcel, Andi could see through the open garage door the still mostly unassembled pieces, some put together incorrectly, of the very heavy rack structure, which had most likely been the contents of last week's parcel from Workout Studio. The other half of the garage was entirely covered in very beautiful dried flowers, hanging upside down in bunches, and Kasey was ducking and weaving between them, tying off decorative ribbons like she belonged in a woodland cabin in a fairy tale. Andi's instincts told her to take over the construction of the shelf so that Kasey could spend more time in what was clearly her element. But more considered thought told her this would be an appropriate behaviour in her role as delivery person. So she delivered the roll of wire, said hello to the golden retriever, who tried to pull off one of the special grip gloves she was wearing, and went on her way. The next day, Andi arrived at the depot to find another roll-shaped parcel addressed to Kasey at Golden Retriever House. A brief probe of the texture indicated that it was probably a different kind of wire. When Andi approached the address, she could see that Kasey had partially dug a shallow trench along the fence line and then got distracted trying to salvage the beautiful sunflowers that were growing in the path of the fencing. The previous roll of wire was unwound along the trench, covering only about a third of one side of the yard. The weights rack was still in the garage in the same state as before, only surrounded by more floristry supplies. There was a large hole in the garage wall where Andi guessed that maybe Kasey had tried to attach a support for the weights rack. She thought about telling Kasey that she didn't think the new wire was going to be enough either, and perhaps she could help, but it seemed unprofessional. So Andi just handed over the new parcel, which Kasey took in one arm, the other full of sunflowers that lit up the tan of her skin with a sunset reflection of gold. Andi said hello to the golden retriever, who placed 2 very muddy paws on the chest of her uniform to lick her face, leaving a brown paw print on each side like a novelty bikini top. That weekend, Florrie and Pan held their housewarming. Kasey invited Joan next door along. She'd be a good local contact for Florrie once Ada returned to Germany, Kasey thought. She was happy to share her adultier adult, especially with a friend who had to manage sharing a house with Pan and Wurst. Plus, Joan would probably bring scones. What Kasey couldn't possibly have predicted was that Joan decided to do something a little different for the party. I make scones all the time, Kasey, she explained. That's not special. For a celebration, I want to do something festive. She settled on a pavlova, coming home the afternoon before the party, laden with shopping bags full of eggs and fruit. At 9 o'clock that night, Kasey ran next door, alarmed by Joan letting out a shriek, to find the kitchen counter and Joan herself covered in pavlova fluff snow. I just wanted to put it on this special plate, Joan wailed. Kasey patted her on the back. I think this might be where Eton mess originated. Kasey took Spanner with her to the housewarming on Saturday. Despite knowing that he would wiggle and whine at the back door all afternoon due to the smell of Wurst inside. It was better than having him brought home again by Alana or one of the other people from town who always gave Kasey such concerned looks. The fence was not ready to be tested yet. There still hadn't been enough wire. Andi wasn't having a great day on Saturday. She'd just been back to attempt redelivery at the house with the inexplicably complicated gate. Stapled onto the gate below the "Please shut the gate" sign had been the words, "Move the brick." And upon looking down, Andi realised that the complicated closing mechanisms all did absolutely nothing. The gate was held closed by a large brick pushed up against the outside. To add insult to injury, when she got to the door, Andi found that no one answered. And coiled up on a rocking chair just beside the door was some kind of green python. The snake might have been a fake, Andi thought, until it blinked and flicked its tongue at her. She hurried to fill out the missed delivery slip, ticking "recipient not at home," and then writing in the blank area for other "snake at door," just in case the people who lived here weren't aware that this might be disconcerting. Next, though, she had something to take to the golden retriever house, which she hoped would make up for the morning's debacle. The scanner seemed to be on its best behaviour today, at least, actually allowing her to click on the submit button after taking photos. What she was doing right today and wrong every other day, she couldn't say. The package didn't appear to be more wire this time, and Andi wondered whether Kasey had finally got a professional to do the fencing. As she approached the house, everything seemed suspiciously quiet. The fence wasn't finished, but the golden retriever didn't come bounding out, and the garage door was shut, concealing the floristry work. Andy realised with a sinking disappointment that neither Kasey nor the dog were at home. A tortoiseshell cat sat on the doormat, looking somewhat smug about this state of affairs. So Andy approached this creature instead, reaching down to stroke its ears. "Meow!" the cat objected, twisting its delicate furred head swiftly around in an attempt to bite Andy's wrist. Andy pulled her hand back and looked at the cat, hurt by its rejection. "Fine then," she muttered. Technically, Kasey had a safe place listed on her delivery instructions. But Andy frowned at the information for a moment before pulling out a wad of missed delivery slips. It wasn't unheard of for the supplier of an item to leave safe place information off of the instructions given to the delivery courier. And not all items had the option to give authority to leave anyway. Probably she could get away with coming back another time to reattempt delivery. That wouldn't seem unprofessional, really, would it? She kept her distance from the tortoiseshell cat and wrote a neat, compact message on the slip. At the housewarming party, Kasey had had a bit of champagne, which she felt later was definitely the reason why she thought that doing a demonstration of some of Spanner's training was a good idea. A little group had gathered on the back lawn, surrounding Kasey and Spanner as she stood with him quite nicely by her side, his back end wagging, but his attention on the treats in her pocket. "Sit," she commanded. Spanner sat, a little wonkily, but sitting nonetheless. "Heel." Kasey walked in a tight circle, and Spanner followed, his nose firmly up against her pocket the whole way. "Could you spread out?" Kasey asked the onlookers. The group dutifully put more space between them. "Weave," Kasey told Spanner. Spanner started to lead her in and out between the other guests. "Well done, Spanner," she exclaimed, patting his ears and offering a few treats as they went. She was pleasantly surprised because this skill had only ever been practiced with random objects at home, never with people. People were much more difficult. They were interesting. They moved. They smelt like snacks. Spanner paused partway around Florrie's friend Nat and stuck his nose into Nat's back jeans pocket to extract a biscuit. Why Nat had a biscuit in his back pocket, Kasey never did find out, because just as she was shouting, "Drop it," worried that the biscuit might contain chocolate chips, the window screen that Ada had temporarily patched for Florrie with tape gave a pop sound and Wurst oozed through the gap, making a run for the barbecue table. Spanner did indeed drop the biscuit, the ferret a much more interesting prize, and ignored Kasey's shouts of "sit" and "no" entirely as he launched himself after Wurst, hurling Kasey to the ground where she lost her grip on his leash. Wurst scurried nimbly up the drain pipe onto the gutter and took off around the other side of the roof, Spanner racing along the ground below, his lead trailing behind him and people's drinks spilling in his wake as he tripped them. "Get the Wurst," cried Ada, rushing after the ferret as Florrie stood, stunned for a moment and completely missing the irony of the sausages on the outdoor table in the panic. Kasey jumped to her feet and dashed after Spanner, eventually catching up with him on the front paving, where someone had spilt some eaten mess that he felt obliged to clean up for them. Kasey led him away in shame, while Ada attempted to coax Wurst down from the roof with some slices of hard-boiled egg. "We must get a professional to put the window screens on," Ada told Florrie. When Kasey, Joan, and Spanner got home, there was a missed parcel slip poked through the cross pieces of the screen door. Kasey extracted it. "Damn, I thought I put authority to leave on the order form for the baby gate." She turned the slip over and saw the following. No dog, sad face. Said hello to cat, but was unfriendly. Kasey, just get a professional. Here's the number of a handy person who can put up your dog-proof fence, build your stand and all the other home gym stuff, and set you free to arrange more flowers. Kiss, kiss, Andi. The name was spelt with a heart above the I, and below it, in very neat fine print, was a mobile phone number. Kasey frowned at it. I can do all those things myself. Joan peered over her shoulder. But do you want to? In the morning, Kasey sat in her garage, spanner at her feet, lolly stretched out like a leopard on the weights bench, and the weights rack still in pieces in the corner. Above her, the dried lavender shifted in a soft gust of wind and set a few petals and grass seeds loose, making her sneeze. She looked again at the missed delivery slip she'd taped to the surface of the table. Eventually, Kasey picked up her phone and sent a text to the mobile phone number. Hi, my name's Kasey Andrews. I'm told you can help with some practical tasks I seem to be failing at. She set the phone aside and looked at Spanner, who she could have sworn was laughing at her. Presently, her phone buzzed. Kasey unlocked the screen and took a moment to take in the message. It said, "You've reached Andi's handy person service. How can I be of assistance?"
Yay, well done. That was gorgeous.
I like the choice of name.
That's lovely. That's a great story. Love it. Well done.
Okay.
We need a name for the story.
I need a name for the story. What does anyone have any ideas for the name for the story?
Ooh.
Spanner in the Wurst.
Spanner in the Wurst. That's pretty good. That one.
That is very good, Baron.
Spanner in
What
the
did he
Wurst.
say? Spanner in the
No,
works.
Spanner in the Wurst.
Spanner in the Wurst.
Because then it's
That's wonderful.
Spanner in the
Good.
Wurst. Oh, fantastic. All right.
That wins.
Okay.
That wins. June's the start of a new financial year, so there could be something monetary.
Something
next story.
monetary.
Have one of those
An accounting.
sales, whatever they are.
A
end of
sale of
financial
some
year
kind.
Sale.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that is that the end of financial year over here is actually in April. So it's not the same.
Wow.
So that's the Australian end of financial year in June. But yeah, right, sales,
Sales.
maybe.
Sales in inverted commas. You know,
Yes.
when those
Not really
things
sale.
go on sale and there's like 50% off and you think, hang on, I'm sure that's 95 cents dearer than it was, you know, 2 months ago when I saw it.
Okay.
Is there
Funny,
something royal? There must be a royal theme in the air somewhere.
Right, something royal.
Well,
Interesting.
perhaps you could put in unwanted inheritance.
Unwanted inheritance.
You know, like get left something. You think, oh,
I don't think Fraser wanted Broderick's inheritance, did he? We had that one. But yes. Left something you're not super keen on. Rather the vein that Florrie didn't really ever like the ferrets.
That's right. That's right.
Well, that makes me think of how it's never like it is in the stories. You know, the number of stories that start with someone has an inheritance and they inherit a grand manor in the countryside.
Yeah.
Or suddenly they're a millionaire, or suddenly, and then, you know, the story goes on.
Yeah.
And you're like, where's my distant great aunt?
I got a
who's
sofa.
That's right. That's right, Tegan. Why were you never Aunt somebody's favourite without your knowing?
Exactly.
Why
You
is
do
it
have
never
a-
true when you get those emails?
How about the one when the lotto machine breaks down?
Then the lotto machine
And
doesn't
all
do that.
But what should happen, Andrew, if you've ever seen, I can't remember when I did, but they used to have a thing with a rotating
spinning thing.
and all,
Yeah.
all the balls would be there and they would drop out. I mean, I think it would be spectacular if that could like explode or
That
something
like
that.
malfunction in some spectacular way. Yeah.
No, even more exciting will be if 2 number 13s came out after one another.
Oh, yeah.
No one wants
Raffle
any free
prizes
ferrets.
be pretty unwanted. You know, like there used to be a person when Barry and I used to do old style dancing, and I think it was Moana, was it?
Yeah.
So there used to be a dance at a local hall near Moana, which is a beachside suburb, Alison.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I think it was an afternoon tea type
Yeah, it
dance,
was.
like
Oh.
2 till 5 o'clock or something odd like that. But there was a woman who used to knit cats, and so there were these knitted cats, and they would have this skirt-like thing, and that was to go over a toilet roll.
Oh,
And people would win, you know, a prize, like 20 prizes. And every time somebody won a prize, all the audience, and all these dignified people in their chiffon dresses and everything, and they'd all start meowing. And it's wonderful.
the unwanted or comical raffle prize.
Yeah.
The one that goes around and around. It comes back next month when you go to the dance
That's
again.
right.
Or you win it back yourself.
Yeah.
There was cat portraits to the
Santas, where you
They went
refuse
that
to pick
well.
up the present.
What about the thing of there's terrible poignancy in this one, might not relate, but it's a gorgeous story. This person wrote, I think, some poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And they're walking down the road and they go past an op shop, and there's this,
Well,
you know, books thrown out for like 50 cents or, you know, 50p or something. And they walk past and they're thinking, oh, just let my book not be in there. And they glance, oh, yeah, my book is in there. And then they can't resist. So they go up and they have a look. And the book's been inscribed by the, you know, the person, to mum and dad. So mum and dad donated the book of poetry. That's cruel. What about, sorry, this is just very close to the bone at the moment, convenient carrying receptacles like my shopping trolley.
Yeah.
And the example I can give is very personal. You load it up, you've done all your shopping, and it's absolutely chockers, and you think, this is a lot of weight for this shopping trolley, and the wheel comes adrift. And of course, not when you're at home or whatever, when you're down, you know, shopping.
Long way.
Ringing for rescue. Yeah.
That is my horror situation, because I take mine down the hill to the Morrisons, and then I bring it very laden up the hill. If the wheel comes off, I'll be going, Lloyd, can you bring a big backpack so we can get this stuff up the hill? I won't be going up the hill without the wheels.
Well, my thing is, you know, I've got this, we live very close to the local shopping centre. I mean, we're not part of it or whatever, we're just around the corner and as the country starts, but it's really very close. It's about, well, it's less than a kilometre.
Yeah.
So less than half a mile, say, about half a mile. And so I've vowed I will never take the car to the shopping centre. I'll always walk. But it doesn't matter how much I'm getting, I will still walk, you know. So I've gone and I've had the trolley, you know, with the wheels.
Trolley and bags.
And I've got a bag on both shoulders, and then you've got your purse, and, you know, so that kind of reluctance. The other thing that makes me think of is setting off for a walk. So I might go for my walk that's going to be 10 or 12 kilometres. And I go, oh, I really think I should have brought an umbrella. And I think it's like 250 metres down the road, but there's no way I'm turning back.
Not going back, isn't it? You've set out now. Yeah.
It's really strange.
The related thing to that is the like refusal to make more than one trip, which I'm really chronic for. Like, say, you know, if you had a load of stuff in the car from a music performance or a dance thing or something, and you're going to bring it into the house, I would be like, you know, 10 things here, and then trying to balance some in a stack and some in the bag and pick them, you know, and it causes disaster because of course you drop things all the way in. But I will not go back and forth.
So maybe eccentric carrying techniques.
Yeah.
Your supermarket discussions could be a good thing.
Mm.
In there, because
interactions you have in the supermarket with other people, or, you know, the person you're shopping with, or
no, with other people, with
other shoppers. Yeah.
I'm sure people take their children in
the lady waiting in front of the sausages. Yeah. Lloyd gets infuriated by people who are like blocking the way to something for a very long time at the shops. There was one day this lady who was choosing sausages, and she was apparently choosing sausages for the whole time that he was shopping. So he kept going back there to and she was still there and still there and still there.
And you'd like to see how they park their vehicles if they're drivers, because they park the trolley like diagonally across
the aisle. Yes, that makes me.
And then they stand back on the other side of the aisle to sort of survey. Never get that again.
Yeah. Lloyd famously did a very comical reaction to a different kind of avocado. Now, I can never remember which way around they are, but we always got the ones with the dark skins on the outside. Yes. And in Australia, we also had these other ones that had a green skin. And one day I got the green skinned avocado and I put it in some salad, and he put it into his mouth. Just went like, bleh, like a little kid, like the tongue hair, everything, and fell back to the plate. And then he just said, never get that again. We say this quite often when the rabbit spit something out or whatever, when we were trying to feed this one, to feed her this awful emergency care food, and she was spitting it out. And so to lighten the atmosphere, we were saying, blah, never get that again.
We now use that as a tag for something you don't like.
Yeah.
Oh, that was an absolute never get that again course, or whatever. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's going to be an interesting one. We'll see how I go with a story that is mostly around sales and shopping centres and raffles and lotteries and such.
And one last one, because I always seem to get the shopping trolley with a bad wheel.
You want
to go straight and it goes sideways and don't go this way. You put stuff in it, you've got to pull it backwards.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Extreme car parks.
Extreme car parks.
Well, okay, it's not that bad, but one of my car parks that I regularly go to for the supermarket is on a slope. So, you've got to get your trolley up to your car and then work out where you can put it. So while you're opening your car, it doesn't run away.
Oh, it doesn't run away.
Otherwise your shopping goes.
Yeah.
Oh, runaway shopping trolley. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Runaway shopping. Oh, yeah. I remember having that experience in the local shops.
Mm-hmm.
Trying, you hold the trolley, otherwise it's gonna go running away in front of the other cars as they're trying to come in. I will check the date for next time, which is the 10th of June. And between now and then, next Sunday, I have one of my virtual exhibitions premiering Sunday morning next week, the 21st. And it's my contribution to this one is the little story writing part. So I've written one first half of a story and one second half of a story following on from someone else's beginning. And they're responding to art from 8 very lovely artists who've done an enormous lovely variety of different kinds of art. So love to show you that if you've got time, and if you're not free at the time at 10 o'clock, our 10 o'clock, your 6:30 at night next Sunday, it will be there on YouTube at the same link, so have a look afterwards. And then the 10th of June for our next story time, which sounds like it's all about a big sale that with all kinds of chaos in the car park and things.
Oh God almighty.
Very interesting one for me, and a very interesting one for most of my characters. I'll have to think who would be good in this situation. If you have any requests for particular people from past stories, Broderick.
Always.
He'd love that, wouldn't he? Being in a huge sale at a big department store or something.
Maybe he wants to fill up one of his castles.
It could be
Wombat and Broderick. Now the question is, can those go together? But I'd have to look at my generations spreadsheet. So, yeah. Oh, that was what I was going to, on the subject of creative chaos. This is what the beginnings of a story time looks like at the moment.
Oh, wow.
It looks like complete chaos, but it is what I call organized chaos, because these scribbles are actually color coding to help me to link the different things together.
Maybe Carter has made lots of little wombats or billbots and given them to like all the family and friends at Christmas over the years, and so some of them have filtered through to sales.
Oh yeah, they like your creation ending up in the op shop thing.
Yeah.
The robots that he's so kindly made for everyone are unwanted. That will certainly make it entertaining at the sales, robots and cats running around everywhere.
Thanks ever so much, sir. Lovely to see everybody.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Bye.
Bye.